In this video, we're looking at the distributive property. And as I have on the screen, the distributive property is always easier to look at symbolically. One of the ways that I often show students is to draw lines connecting the term A, in this case, that is outside the parentheses, with the terms that are inside the parentheses. So it's A times B and then A times C to give you AB plus AC. Essentially what you're doing is you're multiplying this term on the outside of the parentheses by every term of the sum or difference that's inside the parentheses. We often refer to distributive property as a multiplication property over addition, meaning you're doing multiplication multiple times across an addition problem. So to look at some examples, if you've got 3 times the quantity, quantity means parentheses, 2x plus 5, you just do 3 times 2x, and 3 times 5, and that gets you 6x plus 10. And you always want to look and see if there's a way to simplify, but oftentimes on basic distributive property problems you can't simplify. Example 2, you do the same thing. You do 4 times 2x, and you do 4 times 3y, and you do 4 times negative 4. So you're doing 3 multiplication problems this time, because your sum and difference is actually 3 terms. So 4 times 2x is just 8x. 4 times 3y is just 12y. And then you get 4 times negative 4, which you can either change that to plus a negative and make it plus a negative 16, or 4 minus 4, which gives you negative minus 16. So either way it's fine. It doesn't matter how you want to do it. Example 3 is a special case of distributive property, and that's when you've got a negative sign out front. And there's actually 2 ways to think about this. The first way is to use the definition of a negative sign. The definition of a negative sign means take the opposite. And so we would do the opposite of 4x, which is negative 4x. We would do the opposite of negative 2y, which is positive 2y. And the opposite of negative 5, which is positive 5. But another way to think about it is to use a distributive property, which is a negative out front is like multiplying by a negative 1. And then you multiply the negative 1 times 4x, and then negative 1 times negative 2y, and then negative 1 times negative 5. And you get the same answer as I did before. The problem certainly can get more complicated if you look at these 2 examples. This is multiplying a negative 2 times what we refer to as a polynomial or a trinomial. This is a common thing that you'll see whenever you get into algebra. And that's negative 2 times 5, negative 2 times 3, negative 2 times negative 2. Be very careful with this negative sign. Make sure that you're multiplying by the negative. What is a common thing to do on these problems would be to multiply the negative times the first one and get negative 10x squared, but then forget about the negative after that. Got to make sure you pay close attention to negatives. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6x, and negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And then the last one, this one you now have your term outside actually has a variable as well, so you just have to use exponent rules. So 2x times 3x is just 6x squared, and then 2x times negative, or 6x to the third, my bad. And then your 2x times negative x is just a negative 2x squared, and 2x times 2 is just a positive 4. And so that's your answer for that problem. Again, when you're doing these, it's really just about being organized, paying close attention to negatives, and then just remembering whatever rules apply to that multiplication that you're doing.